everyone, and welcome back. I'm Nathan.
And I am Mia. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we share our daily highs and lows and talk about how we're navigating life and marriage with God's guidance every step of the way.
Absolutely, and today's going to be a great one. It's all about the power of a gentle answer. When things get overwhelming or heated, it's easy to feel like everything's an emergency, and it just needs to be addressed right this second.
Right this second,
It's
yes.
I can't handle anything else, completely overwhelmed, right now.
Yeah, so the urgency could definitely quickly spiral into what we call the crazy cycle, which is basically where frustration and defensiveness often feed off of each other.
Yeah,
Sound familiar?
Absolutely it does, and we've definitely been there.
Yeah.
But through counseling, we've learned to take prayerful pauses, adopt a new mantra, which is big for me because I just take a breath and I'm like, this is not an emergency. This does not need to be handled right this second.
I can't even count the amount of times you say that.
All the time. Because it's just in my mind is I'm that person who's gotta fix it, gotta do it now. Yeah. It's if I don't do it now, it's gonna be gone.
Yeah. So today we're going to break it down into 3 parts. So one being how prayerful pauses can reset your perspective and why gentleness is powerful, even when your spouse is what we call up, and how to practice turning the 4-hour fights into 4-minute resolutions.
Yeah, and like normal, we're going to share a funny story or two about how this really just works for us and how we apply this.
Yeah, because we're not professionals. It's not like we don't fight. Just to begin the conversation by saying this is a journey for all of us, and we're just sharing some things that help us.
Yeah.
Would say 90% of the time.
Yeah, so with that, let's jump in.
Yeah, so one thing that we've learned in counseling is just the importance of taking a prayerful pause. I feel like we learned that in counseling. We've read that in pretty much every single marriage book, Habits of the Household, things like that. It's really about stopping and taking a moment to ask God for wisdom instead of reacting immediately and impulsively and just out of your flesh.
So yeah, that reminds me of a verse in Proverbs. I got my sticky note right here. I'll pull it up. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger."
Yeah. That's
and that means to me, just kind of reaffirms, just taking that prayerful pause. Mm-hmm. And just, we're saying the mantra for me, hey, this is not an emergency. This does not need to be handled right this second.
Yeah.
Can just really just set the tone for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, because I'm definitely I want to fix it right now. I feel like we both have that when you're both kind of stubborn in that way. It makes things a little bit more difficult, but
interesting for sure.
when I hear you say, this is an emergency, doesn't need to be fixed right now, or you're right, I'm sorry, because often it'll be like, hey, we don't talk to each other like that, and even something like that is enough to shift your attitude to be like, oh, hey, you're right.
Not sure we're right on my back. I'm on the offense. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's just hey, we don't talk like that.
You're right.
You're right. And then it's again, naturally, it's just just that breath.
Yeah.
It's just
pause.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in the past, when you're we don't talk like that, and some previous responses might be, well, I'm mad, or you did this and you did that, and it's blaming the other person is kind of what we were reading this morning about is that Adam and Eve mentality of it's not my fault that I'm behaving this way, it's your fault. And it's well, no, you're responsible for the way that you behave. And when we call that out in each other, allowing that to be the reset that we need to bring the tone of the conversation down can really change the entire conversation.
Yeah, and just to be honest, it's not about ignoring an issue whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's just pausing and approaching it with clarity of mind.
Yeah, it's responding instead of reacting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so practical tip, if you guys are feeling overwhelmed, take a moment, step away, say a prayer, even if it's something as simple as Lord, help me to respond with love and wisdom. Or one of my favorites, one of my friends says is, Lord, this is your son, handle him.
Yeah, right.
I love that.
That's good advice. Good prayer. Lord, come get your child.
Literally.
The second key here is learning how to respond with gentleness, especially when your spouse is up. And by up, I mean upset, frustrated, or even just to be honest, yelling or cussing or screaming, or just for people who aren't screamers, who are just really passive aggressive, they'll just You know they're mad.
It's the silent treatment,
right?
The stonewalling,
the slamming of doors, it's the stomping downstairs, it's like all the things.
The dishes are like so loud today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's like one of those things where if you're spiraling and you're trying to calm a conversation, if your spouse is up and they're doing all of these things, you can catch them off guard by coming up to them and responding gently. Yeah. It's like you're ready for a full-blown argument and your spouse comes up and they're like, hey, honey, I love you. Let's talk.
Yeah. And it's like, instead of reacting, they hopefully respond gently.
Yeah. So it's like when you're behaving some type of way, I'm not going to take that bait and then I'm going to match your level. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, I match energies. Why?
Yeah. Like, that doesn't even make sense. That's so wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in my Bible, though, I have another note for Ephesians 4:2. Here it is. Be completely humble and gentle. Mm-hmm. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. This is a high calling.
Yeah.
When we respond gently, it shows we are, prioritizing the other person over being right. Like, one of the favorite things I've heard, which is, like, you can win the fight.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And lose the marriage.
Yeah.
So, like, what is of more value to you? Being right or saving your marriage?
Yeah. And for the wives listening, when your husband steps up like this, you need to kind of acknowledge that because it's hard to do that, and it also encourages and reaffirms that positive behavior. Husbands or wives, it takes a lot to not take the bait. It takes a lot to be arguing and have someone who's up and upset and they're frustrated and they're slamming doors and doing all the things. It takes a lot to say, hey, honey, I hear you. I love you. Let's talk through this. Like, it takes a lot to do that when your spouse is acting ridiculous. Yeah. So when your spouse does that and you're the one who's, acting crazy, acknowledge, like, hey, I appreciate you de-escalating. Yeah. Because it would be 10 times easier for you to just match my energy and escalate right now. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so, like, that reminds me of, like, when I was a kid, like, we had these bracelets, and it'd be like, they come in all different kinds of colors. Mm-hmm. But they all said, like, WWJD. And it was just a reminder of, like, what would Jesus do?
Okay.
And it reminds me to think of, like, all times in, like, the Old Testament and the New Testament, where Jesus was, like, surrounded by nonsense. He never reacted to it. Like, he always responded, and he always was gentle and always kind.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's like, if we look to God and to Jesus and adopt the mantra, for you, it's, this is an emergency. But even just something as simple as, what would Jesus do? Yeah. Would Jesus react? Or would Jesus respond with grace and truth? So yeah, I feel like that's a really good point. And the thing about this is learning to respond gently and to take those prayerful pauses. That's not some skill that you just adapt and learn overnight.
Yeah, definitely not.
But you got to practice it. It is something that you can learn and that you can grow in to help, like, change those 4-hour fights and the crazy cycles into just a couple of minutes of conflict.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and this has been huge for us because, like she was saying, a disagreement for us could literally ruin an entire day. Maybe even an entire week.
Yeah.
We'd be brewing about things for, like, days.
Yeah.
But now it's more like, okay, hey, we're off track. Let's get back to it.
Yeah, let's reset. And part of that reset is just being open to correction without getting defensive. And defensiveness is just a sign of being offended, and offense is a spirit that we choose to pick up. So if I'm out of line and Nathan gently points it out, I try not to immediately jump to, well, you're not perfect either, because we're not. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It absolutely takes humility on both sides.
Yeah, 100%.
And, like, just remember, like, men, we are called to lead spiritually.
Yeah.
And physically and emotionally and all the ways. We're called all the lead. But, for us, like, that means setting the tone. Mm-hmm. So, maybe your wife isn't the apologetic kind. Like, maybe you have to hunt her down.
No, I struggle saying sorry. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No shame.
But, as men, like, if we're called to lead, that means, like, hey, we might not feel like it.
Yeah.
But we still have to come back and we have to apologize first.
Yeah. And when you lead well, it inspires me to follow you. It's like that. Yeah. It's the beautiful cycle of how things were designed to be.
Oh, absolutely. And that reminds me of another note I had. Colossians 3:13 says, "Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you." that kind of forgiveness and patience is what makes, quick resolutions and just forgiveness even really possible. Like, we forgive because we were forgiven much.
Yeah, and that's kind of a part of the daily prayer that we say every day, which I think helps us, is like, forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So some takeaways today would be to practice those prayerful pauses and resetting your own perspective, and then learn how to respond with gentleness, especially when your spouse is up. Do not match their level. Bring it back down. And remember, this takes time, but it can turn those hours or days of conflict into minutes of resolution and reconciliation.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope this encouraged you guys today, and hopefully encourages you in the future to handle conflict in your marriage with just more grace and patience.
Yeah.
And a little bit of
finesse. Don't forget that we love to hear from you guys, how you guys are incorporating prayer into your life. Reach out to us down below in the comments. Let us know what you think about these topics. Or you could send me a private message on Instagram. My handle is @Ashmen. But that's it for today.
Yep. So thanks for listening to Deserts and Gardens. Until next time, walk in love.
Live with purpose and trust God in every desert and garden. See ya.